Whatever you're doing right now, I want you to stop. So whether you're driving down the road to a sales call, whether you're about to pick up the phone to call a prospect, maybe you're in the gym running, wondering about what's on your calendar today as far as leads, or let's say that you're even walking into a boardroom meeting right now to finalize the deal. Heck, in our time we live, maybe you're doing that on Zoom right now or WebEx, okay? Whatever you're doing, I want you to stop and think and ask yourself, what does it actually take, seriously, to be a top 1% salesperson in your industry, okay? The salesperson who makes all the money, okay? The salesperson who gets any promotion they want. In fact, they turn down promotions they don't want. They have all the respect in the company from management, from ownership. The salesperson who leads by example, not just because they're cool, but because they outperform everyone else. My next guest is going to help answer that question. Let me give you a small taste of this gentleman's background. He is a senior lecturer, because I was wondering what he has not done. But he's a senior lecturer in the Entrepreneur Management Unit at Harvard Business School. He teaches entrepreneur sales and marketing in the second-year MBA program in the fall term, and the Entrepreneur Manager and Startup Boot Camp in the first-year MBA program in the spring and winter terms. Now, prior to Harvard, he served as a senior vice president of global sales and services at a company called Hubspot. You all probably know that, where he scaled annualized revenue from $0 to 100 million and expanded his team from 1 to 450 employees. Well done, my friend. He was ranked number 19 in the Forbes top 30 social sellers in the world. He was also awarded the 2010 Salesperson of the Year at the MIT Sales Conference. He's an active member, a number of startups as a board of directors member, advisory board member, investor, and he received his MBA from the MIT Sloan School of Management and BA in Mechanical Engineering from Lehigh University. He's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Inc., Boston Globe, TechCrunch, Harvard Business Review, and many other major publications for his entrepreneur ventures. He's also the author of the best-selling book. We're going to talk about it today, The Sales Acceleration Formula, using data, technology, inbound selling to go from 0 to 100 million. Let's welcome to the show, Mr. Mark Roberge. Did I pronounce that last name right?
You nailed it, Jeremy. I got to bring you around with me. That is the best introduction I've ever heard. Thank you.
I brought in a coach. I brought in a coach to pronounce that last name the right way. You know what I mean? So hey,
you got it.
All right. So hey, I'm excited to have you on here. I love talking about human behavior. How does human behavior relate to understanding how human beings make decisions and or don't make the decision you want them to? How do you get someone to persuade themselves using techniques that work with human behavior rather than using techniques that work against it? Okay. So I want to dive right into your story, maybe give our listeners a little bit of a background about how you arrived at this point in your life where you're one of the elite authorities on sales and persuasion. How did you learn all these skills?
Serendipity, to be honest. No intention, I swear, Jeremy, it's crazy. I'm an engineer by training, quant through my whole career. That's what drew me to MIT. And then a passion for entrepreneurship. That's really, I probably consider myself honestly more of an entrepreneur than a salesperson, even though I love sales. They're one and the same. They really are. They make the best entrepreneurs. And I just kind of came out of MIT and had sat next to the founders of HubSpot in class. And one of them recruited me in and the other one said, you should do sales for us. And that was it. And I was very fortunate that my dad grew up selling Cutco knives and then furniture and then sales consultancy. So he was right there in the background helping me with the first phases of how the heck does the sales stuff work? Because they don't teach you that really at MIT.
They don't teach you that at Harvard either. Really.
Now they do, but thanks to heading over there. But it's been a while since they have.
Sure. Now let's talk about this award. I wanted to start there. So you're awarded the Salesperson of the Year back in 2010. Impressive achievement. Maybe describe for our listeners, what did it actually take for you to accomplish something of that achievement?
Well, that was an interesting award. I mean, how many people actually, this is the MIT Sales Award. How many people from MIT actually go into sales? No, but
it was between you and three others.
No, but I think what it stood for, honestly, was I was very fortunate to go into sales around 2006, 2007, where the field was going through a remarkable shift, especially in my sector of software. I know we have a very diverse audience today, but prior to that age, most sales was done door to door with 42 long white male athlete salespeople, right? And now it's shifted to inside, and hopefully we have a lot more diversity and we have a lot more way to go there. But I think just the execution element of it, you could actually close deals over the phone in software, which is like very few people had done that.
Sure.
Right. And you had the internet and cloud and WebEx and all that kind of stuff. And what a lot of people don't realize is suddenly we had a bunch of data.
Yeah.
Right. Like before, no one would use a CRM. There was no data accessible. And suddenly all these inside sellers were dependent on the CRM, and there was a bunch of data, and that is music to the ears for an MIT grad. And that was really, I think, what was the first sort of catapult for the representation of the award and some of the accolades was an opportunity to bring a lot more science and data to this magical artistic field that few people understand.
That's interesting. So let's talk about HubSpot. I mean, obviously HubSpot, very successful company. You took HubSpot from $0. Does that mean you were there in the very beginning? I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
First customer.
You're there, very beginning. You're taking them from $0 in revenue to $100 million, and you help build a team of 450 employees. Okay. Now that looks good on paper, but obviously there's a lot that goes behind that. What was behind that achievement and actually helping get to that point?
Oh my gosh. What was behind that? A lot of stress, a lot of sleepless nights. I mean, to be frank, I think what was cool about it is I get bored of stuff quickly. So I have a little bit of like career ADHD. Yeah. And it was perfect for that journey. Because like I literally got in there and there's 4 people, right, at the company. And there's 2 programmers and like the CEO and me selling, right? Yeah. And a marketer, right? So I had to be a salesperson. I had to learn how to be a seller. I had to build the playbook. I had to set all that stuff up. And I was half salesperson, half sales ops to figure out, because I knew I wanted to build a big company. Yeah. And then after like getting to 100 customers, now I had to be sales manager. How do you hire these people? Like, who are we hiring? How do we compensate them? How do you coach them? What's the playbook? Yeah. And then after like 9 months, I was sales director. I had to build our first manager level.
You were the one writing the playbook as you went.
Yeah, just like, and how do you build a manager? Who should be a manager? How do you compensate them? And then you're a sales VP and you have to, so it was like, it was a lot. I guess that's the way to summarize it is the job changed every 9 months, and it had to. Because if you were still doing what you were doing 9 months ago, you're a cook. You weren't going to scale.
You're gone. That's like I said, $0 to $100 million. That takes a lot of skill and a lot of hard work. It's not just hard work. It takes a lot of skill to actually get to that level. Now, I want to talk to you about this book. Okay, 2015, you wrote a book called The Sales Acceleration Formula. Now, I have an idea of why you wrote this and who you wrote it for, but maybe not everybody does. Why did you write this book first, besides just being bored? And who did you write it for specifically?
Sort of evolved. I mean, I don't know if you know Jill Conrath, but she's just such an amazing best-selling author in the world of sales, selling to big companies, just like just so many great books. And she had attended one of our inbound conferences that got quite big as a speaker. And I had breakfast with her, and she heard my story, and she's like, she whips out a piece of paper. She's like, The Art and Science of Sales by Jill Conrath and Mark Roberge. And she's like, I want to write this book with you. And I was like, Jill, I'm not really a good writer, and I'm really busy with
I'm really busy at work, right?
You know, like, but at the same time, I'm like, it's not every day that some best-selling author is like, let's write a book together, right? So I had to go with it. And so she's like, write a chapter and I'll write a chapter. We'll bring it to my publisher. We'll get this thing signed. Yeah. And I wrote the chapter and she's like, oh my gosh, this is such a cool book. She's like, you have to write your first book by yourself. And then we'll write another one together later. So now I'm like writing this book. And to be honest, at that point, it did make sense, Jeremy, for 2 reasons. Number one, HubSpot started to get known, and I had an hour commute to and from work, and a lot of entrepreneurs and salespeople would be calling me like, how do you do this? How do you do that? And it was the same question every time. Like, what do you look for in a salesperson? How do you compensate them, et cetera? And I would answer their question in the same way. And I always get a love letter like 2 months later, like, oh, that was awesome. This is the success we've had, et cetera. So I had a really good sense of like what the market was curious about and what was helping them. And I just wrote it. Yeah. That's where it came from. So it was largely to help out the ecosystem.
Okay, I love that. Now, In chapter 1 of the book, you talk about top characteristics of a successful salesperson. In your mind, like your advice, what would be the top 3 characteristics that all successful salespeople have to have if they want to be at that level?
All right, it's a little bit of a trapdoor question, Jeremy, because that's one of the issues that I find out there is the optimal sales hire is different by company and context. And if you bring context to life, I would summarize into 3 elements, which is what are you selling? Like jets or pencils?
Yeah.
Who are you selling to? CIOs or grandmothers or teenagers?
Sure.
And what stage are you at? Are you a startup or a $1 billion multinational company? Right.
Yeah.
So these are the sectors that would differentiate like who the optimal sales hire is. Now, there's ways to engineer your hiring formula, which is what that particular element of the book is. And that's what I did is I theorized on what are the 8 characteristics that would correlate in our environment. I scored all our candidates against that. And over time, I ran a regression analysis to prove that these attributes actually correlated. Okay. So now to get to your question, I do see that if I had to pick 3 across all contexts, I would say...
Well, here, let me do this because I actually wrote down this question. I think this leads right into the same question because in chapter 2, you outlined 5 traits that salespeople have.
That was Hubspot.
If you're a business owner or an executive, these are the 5 traits you look for to hire. Can you talk about each one of those maybe quickly?
Sure.
I know the first one's coachability.
Yeah, coachability is the most important for me. And that one wasn't even in my initial theory. It took me 2 years of failing with certain hires and being like, what the heck? What are these people missing? And it was like, it's the coachability, right? And so coachability, curiosity, intelligence, work ethic, and prior success. Those are the 5 that statistically correlated highest with our top performers at HubSpot. And I would say coachability and curiosity and probably work ethic, you would see that in a lot of different programs.
We know about work ethic. What do you mean by curiosity? What does that mean?
Yeah, so that largely is like a consultative selling style. And that's not going to come up in every situation, but in a lot of the ones that I work in where you're selling to very smart buyers, you need that. So it's just someone who's going to come in and not show up and throw up and pitch the product, but actually come in with a well-architected sequence of open-ended questions to understand the pain of the
so they're not jamming and cramming or choking by the tie until they buy, like that old school way of thinking about selling. So you're talking about salespeople that are more collaborative rather than most salespeople have been taught how to be adversarial. It's like me against the customer. I'm trying to manipulate them to buy. You're talking about how do I work with them to help them find problems that maybe they didn't think they had, because most prospects don't even know what their problems are when you first talk to them, right? Yep. So you become a problem finder and problem solver, whereas most salespeople are trying to be product pushers.
Exactly.
Big difference in your income ability and be able to help solve those problems.
So many stats out there to support that too now, Jeremy.
It's all
the science.
It's all the science. It's data for sure. It's. I think a lot of people originally like, oh my gosh, it just works to do it this way because that's what they've always been told. But there was no data to back it up. Now we have the data of what actually works and what doesn't work, right? So you have to learn skills. You have to, like you said, you have to learn the right questions that work with human behavior. Okay, that get that prospect to become curious enough to want to engage with you. Because when you first talk to a prospect, like you know, according to the data, they are picking up in the first 30 to 60 seconds social cues from you based on your tonality and based on what you are saying and asking. And we could go on for probably 7 hours depending on that.
I imagine that's a big part of knowing the title of your show, Jeremy. That's like a big part of your themes. And I'll leave one stat with you on. You can move to wherever you want to go, but this Gone.io is a really cool AI listening tool for sales calls. I think this particular study came from 40,000 sales calls, and it was on the first sales meeting. The top third performers in that study talked 46% on the first call. The buyer talked 54%. The worst performing third salespeople talked 72%. Stats across 30,000 calls.
I would even say your top 1% of the 1% probably talk less than 20%.
Probably.
And the prospect's talking about 80% of the time,
Completely.
100%. Now, in part 2 of your book, you detail what you call the sales training formula. What does that mean? Can you talk about that for me?
Yeah, it's funny because in the first year of the job, I took a different VP of sales out to coffee to figure out all the stuff. And I'm like, how do you train your reps? And most of them were did these just do a ride along. I was like, hey, Jeremy, welcome to the company. Remember Susan? She's our top rep. Your trainee is going to be sitting next to her for a month. And that, like, I'm always trying to seek out like predictable growth.
Yeah.
And that does not sound predictable. That sounds like an opportunity for salespeople to pass bad habits to each other.
Sure.
Right. And so that's really what I sought out to do in the training formula is, can I codify the playbook and create enough artistic room for people to have their own authentic style?
Okay.
But like, see if I can break it down to the codified steps that can teach with people. And I think the one element that I'll share there is it starts with the buyer journey. So many of these sales training processes start with, here's what the product does.
Yeah. Product pushers.
Product pushers. What percent of your sales training is about your product?
Yeah.
If it's over 50%, you're training product pushers.
Can I suggest something there?
Go ahead, Jeremy.
So one of my largest clients is Google AdWords. We trained 4 of their divisions. So it was one of my first B2B clients. When we came in there, Google, right? And I asked them, like, walk me through, like, if I'm a sales rep that's starting today with you, what would my sales training entail? What would it look like for me? And they're like, oh, well, we do the product training about this and this, and it goes for 3 months and all this, blah, 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 blah. And it was all features and benefits of the product. No questions that work with human behavior. If the customer has a concern, how do you help them resolve that? Nothing like that. They thought that typically, because they just, when they called, said, I'm with Google, that people would just sign up left and right and buy. And with some of these new divisions, they were dramatically failing, like losing millions of dollars like weekly, because it was all product pushing. Just like most salespeople have been taught to ask a few questions to find out, what's your biggest problem, or what solution are you looking for? The prospect gives a logical based answer, which is really just the surface of what's really going on, right? Because they're not going to open up to that. And then the salesperson does what? They jump in with their solution, talking about the features and benefits and how they have the best this and the best that, and the competitors suck and we're better because of this. And it's like taking a bucket of mud and like literally like throwing it against the wall, hoping and praying something we say is going to magically trigger that person to want to buy. And I call that hopium. It's a drug that so many salespeople are on, where they just hope and pray what they say is going to stick in that person's one. And it's such a hard way to make a living and really scale your company. Yeah, so I love it. Let's keep going. I cut you off there.
Yeah, I love that hopium. Yeah, so I think to your point, like for the folks that are listening, like what percent of the sales training was about the product?
Yeah.
And what percent's about the buyer?
Yeah.
And so that was really, we probably don't have time to go through the whole playbook and how it was trained, but like the key piece to it was it started with the buyer's journey. The first thing you saw was not what the product does. The first thing you saw is, how is the buyer thinking about this problem before they even know what product is coming?
Yeah.
So that was the codification there.
Yeah, it's so important because you're asking the right questions at the right time in the conversation that help that prospect find problems that they didn't even know they had, right? Or maybe they knew about the problem, but they didn't know how bad it really was. Or maybe they knew they had a problem, but they didn't realize the consequences of that problem if they don't do anything about it. And once you are able to get really what's behind that why, not just what the why is, why they're looking, but what's behind that, and you help them, not just you, but you help them see the root causes of their problems and how the problems are affecting them, not by you telling them, but by asking those questions where they tell themselves. That's when they start to view you as the trusted authority in the market, the expert. And it doesn't matter if your product's 20, 30, 50% more than the competitors. They will gladly pay for that because they look at you as the person who can get them results. Whereas all of their salespeople that are trying to stuff their solution down their throat, they commoditize them and just compete on price. It's a massive difference in your income as a salesperson, 100%. Now,
and there was one other transition, quick, Jeremy, just I think it'd be useful to your listeners is in the beginning, we ran a BANT qualifying matrix to help scaffold that discussion.
I always say BANT is buzz.
So budget, authority, need, timing. Okay. Now, of course, we did not train them to ask about budget first, right? It was more about the need and quantify and implicate, et cetera. But when you're scaling fast, it's never perfect out of the gate. And I found that the salespeople were sometimes in the beginning be like, what's your budget? And I was like, oh my gosh, why was it? Yeah. So I created a new one called GPCT, which is goal, plan, challenge, timeline. And even when they were early in their development and still had the train wheels on, if all they said was, what is your goal? What's your plan to hit that goal? What are your challenges to execute the plan? And what's your timeline on achieving the goal? It actually didn't come out that bad, right?
Yeah.
So just an example, perfect line with what you're saying and how the most successful ones navigate the conversation.
Well, I always say that BANT is just a bunch of BS. And here's why, because whoever invented BANT doesn't understand human psychology, okay? Because what you're assuming is that your prospects just understand what their problems are right when you come to them. And 90% of them do not understand what their real problems are. They might understand I have this problem, but your questioning skills bring out this problem and this problem and this problem and make it 10 times worse in their mind. And they will do whatever the hell they can to go out and find that budget at that point. It doesn't matter if they don't have the budget, they'll go do it. It's like, I'll give you an example. It's like if you have a toothache, right? And you're like, man, I've got $10 to go get some medicine to fix this toothache, right? And, it doesn't work. And you go into the dentist and you're like, oh my gosh, we've got to remove this tooth right now. Because if it doesn't remove this tooth, your jaw's going to swell up to this big. It can cause this problem. And like literally you're going to be in the hospital in 2 days. And oh, by the way, the surgery is going to cost $5,000. Well, now you realize you have a much bigger problem than you thought you had. So do you think you're going to go out and find that budget to take care of that problem? Of course you are. But if you tried to BANT that opportunity in the beginning, you would have lost that sale because you don't understand human psychology. 100%. I love what you just said about the other thing. Now that's a big shift there. Now in chapter 6, you also talk about how to manufacture helpful salespeople, help them like build buyer trust. How do you do that with what you've taught?
Yeah, I mean, we always led with helpful education, and that was core to our mission at HubSpot. If you know about our company, we were early advocates of like content marketing and inbound marketing. So don't go out there talking about your product, go out there educating customers about their problems. Yeah. And that's where we started. I mean, some of our leads originated from like a website ebook download. And it wasn't like, hey, can I give you a demo of a product? It was like, you downloaded this ebook on blogging, Jeremy. Yeah. What questions did you have? Yeah. And all of our salespeople were trained to be great marketers. Yeah. Like the whole first conversation was like, here's how you want to blog. Here's how you want to title your articles. Here's how long they should be. Here's what you want to think they should be about. Here's how to optimize it for SEO. Yeah. Like that's to your point. I mean, you and I have the same perspective here on sales. Is like our salespeople, like all of our customers would have loved to hire them as consultants. Yeah. You know what I mean? They would have loved to just take them away from us and come be my consultant. And that's really the future of sales, is to be able to be positioned that way to your buyer. Yeah. Yeah. You're positioned as the expert, as what we call the trusted authority. So it doesn't matter if you're 10, 20, 30% higher. They don't view you like they view all the other salespeople. They put all those other salespeople in the corner, the ones that are like stuffing the solution down their throat, and they commoditize all of them. And they go to you, the expert, because they view you as the one who's going to get them the results, because your questions get them to think results-based thinking rather than cost-based thinking. And that is a major difference as a sales professional. Well said. What's one of the most important questions that a salesperson should be asking the prospect in the sales process in your mind? Well, this one is the toughest one, and I don't want to say it's exclusively. Asking about need, I think, is great for the buyer and very useful for the seller. Yeah. Asking about budget is very useful for the seller, not that useful for the buyer, but we can develop it together. Yeah, I think the number one is timing and urgency. That's the one where it's big differentiation between the absolute top performers and the mediocre players. When I go out, I've probably asked 1,000 different companies, like, what's your number one reason for losing deals? Every single one. Yeah. It's not competition, it's timing. Is getting them like to develop that urgency. So just as you kind of deepen the relationship, you really need a lot of trust, in my opinion, because it can come off really bad if you don't deliver it right. But it's just like, Jeremy, thank you so much for the last 30 minutes. It's just been so rewarding to get to know you and your business and some of the challenges you've been going through. And it does seem like, we have a lot of experience in addressing that. I want to go through that with you. The only thing I'm not quite sure about is you've been operating like this for 2 years, and I don't understand why it's a big deal to solve this by Q2, and why you can't just, what would be the big deal if that doesn't happen? Yeah. Right. And just, so do you see what you're doing there? You're getting them to basically persuade themselves by telling you, but more importantly, who are they telling? They're telling themselves. They never thought it through. Why? That's an urgency question. So basically they are building urgency in their mind. It's almost like a consequence question, because you're asking them like, what's prevented you from solving this in the past?
And it gets them to think like, holy hell, why have I not done anything about this? And it makes it come to the forefront of their mind where it now becomes urgent to do something about it. So it dramatically speeds up your sales process. So instead of maybe if you're in a complex selling environment and your average sale takes 6 to 9 months, just some of those questions alone could take that 6-month sales process and get it down to 2 or 3, because it's now far more urgent because your questions help them think and question their way of thinking that's allowed them to stay in that status quo for so long.
Exactly. I mean, I think where I get inspiration on selling is from like good doctors and therapists. You know what I mean? Like you go to the doctor, they're not like, hey, Jeremy, how you doing? I know you called me about the pain in your foot, but I got this new drug that just showed up here today. You should, they're just like, what's going on? Where'd the pain come from? How does it hurt here? How does it hurt there? And then they're like, this is what you have, Jeremy. You have a mild sprain and here's what you want to take. And you're not like, let me think about it. Or can I get 20% off? You know what I mean? Like you see the diploma, the guy or gal is there to help you. And yeah, exactly. So that's where I get my inspiration on how to sell in a pure way.
I think it's so true. Hey, and I enjoyed having you on the show. Like, well done, my friend. Do you have any final thoughts or advice for our listeners?
The only thing I'm up to now, Jeremy, that's different is like I've been pulled into venture capital in the software arena now, which has been fun because the sales folks have been left out of it. So I've been at it for 3 years. And the only reason I bring it up for your audience, it's the first VC fund run and backed by sales leaders. And we have a Emerging Leaders Syndicate where we teach these people, these sellers who have no idea about investing. We teach them how to invest in startups. And then when we do a deal, we do a big deal, we carve out allocation for them to make small investments into these inaccessible deals. So it's called Stage 2 Capital. If there is interest for folks, we enlist about 30 people a quarter into that emerging.
Where can our listeners learn more about
Stage2.capital? And you can check it out there.
Mark, pleasure having you on here. I even pronounced your name, I think, halfway right.
Perfect.
So that was a bonus. We need to have you back out here when we have a little bit longer. I've got more questions for you, but well done, my friend. Appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Okay, talk to you soon.
Now, if you're serious about joining the top 1%, I mean the top 1%, and you want to experience more training content just like this, click the links right over there. Right over there, they're exactly what you need to see next. You see, I release new episodes featuring top salespeople and sales authorities, multiple 6-figure, high 6-figure, even 7-figure earners. And if you're new here, do yourself a favor and smash that subscribe button right below, and join our new Facebook group, Sales Revolution. You see, it's free, and there's a link in the description below just for you. We put it there for you. Finally, I make posts on Facebook and Instagram each and every day with more tips and training. So be sure and follow me and turn on your notifications. So make a comment in the first 7 minutes to any of my latest posts, share this episode, and there's a very real chance that you're gonna win some killer prizes. And here's the thing, don't sit on the sidelines. Don't be like everyone else. Get into the game. Join the sales revolution. Stay active, get involved, learn the right skills, and we will show you how to take your life and income to a level that most only dream about.